Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, October 12th. We've been following two big weather stories across the nation. First is a tropical system that formed over the Gulf of Mexico, aided by some moisture and some energy from a Pacific Ocean tropical system, Hurricane Lydia. That tropical Gulf low is causing some heavy rainfall this morning across the southeastern part of the nation. And also, we've been monitoring a storm system that is moving across the northern half of the nation, producing some snow. Right now, in the higher elevations of the western U.S., it'll produce another wet and cool weekend in much of the Mid-Atlantic region, which continues a recent trend where we've had a cool and wet Saturdays for many of the last several weekends here. And it looks like yet another one on the way for this upcoming weekend. Let's start off by looking at WSI's and telecast.com radar map across the nation. First of all, southeastern states. This is actually some moisture from the Pacific Ocean. Hurricane Lydia moved into the west coast area of Mexico over the past 24, 48 hours or so. Some of its energy and moisture helped to kind of rejuvenate a system over the Gulf of Mexico. That has continued to move to the east-northeast, and it is producing soaking rainfall this morning across Georgia, parts of Florida, into the Carolinas. It will continue to move on an east-northeast fashion, and that particular system may intensify once again as it moves out over the open waters, the open, still warm waters of the western Atlantic, right in this part of the Atlantic Ocean. It will not move up the eastern seaboard, but rather east-northeast out into the open waters of the western Atlantic. Meanwhile, across the northern U.S., we have some blue showing up here. That's snow at higher elevation locations, places like eastern Idaho, Wyoming, and some rain stretched out across the northern U.S. And this is associated with a deep upper level low. We'll take a look at those forecast maps at the 500 millibar level shortly. And an initial wave of low pressure will move to the Ohio Valley by the early part of the upcoming weekend, and then a secondary system will form right here off the Mid-Atlantic coastline and produce another wet and cool weekend in places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, with a persistent onshore flow of air. It's low-level east or northeast winds below normal temperatures, again, continuing a trend that we've had in the Mid-Atlantic region during the past several weeks. It looks like this system will also move basically east-northeast, much like this Gulf tropical system, and will not move up along the New England coastline, but rather east-northeast from the Mid-Atlantic out into the open waters of the northwestern Atlantic Ocean. Well, let's walk through last night's zero-Z run of the Canadian model. I think it has a pretty good handle on the situation right now. Before we get to the actual forecast maps, we'll take a look here at the 5-day total precipitation forecast map, again using the conventional version of the Canadian model from zero-Z last night. First of all, this is in the short term. Over the next day or two, a lot of rainfall down across the southeastern states. Again, this is partly as a result of a system Lydia that crossed into Mexico here as a strong hurricane, and there was a Gulf wave down in the southwestern part of the Gulf of Mexico, and once it got that boost of the Pacific moisture and a little bit of energy, it intensified and moved in this fashion. Will continue to move in an east-northeast direction, but again, soaking rainfall today across much of the southeastern states all the way up into the Carolinas. Meanwhile, see in a moment here, a strong upper level low right now over the interior west, and that will help to produce intensifying surface low pressure. It basically moves in this direction here. By the early part of the weekend, we'll have a surface low right here, and then a secondary low will form off the Mid-Atlantic coastline. Let me now clear the deck here, and this whole swath of rain and snow, this is total precipitation amounts over the next 5 days, is as a result of that deep upper level low translating some energy all the way to the Mid-Atlantic coastline over the upcoming weekend. And again, we've had this onshore flow many weekends in the past month or two, east-northeast winds, and that produces cooler than normal temperatures this time of the year, most times of the year, in fact. And indeed, you'll see east to northeast winds in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City on Saturday into Sunday. It'll stay well below normal, most likely confining high temperatures to the 50s in many areas of the Mid-Atlantic region on Saturday and Sunday as well. And we'll see in a moment that upper level trough over the eastern U.S. It's a very slow mover, so it'll maintain some cool and unsettled weather in the Mid-Atlantic region during the early part of next week. Well, we're getting to that time of the year where we want to take a look at accumulating snow in this pattern. And here we go. This is over the next few days what the Canadian model is putting out. Several inches of snow in some of those higher elevations. And that's in the near term over the next day or two associated with the system right now over the interior western states, all the way from the Colorado Rockies up across much of Wyoming and even into Montana and eastern Idaho. Some accumulating snow over the next couple of days. Well, now let's take a look at that 500 millibar height pattern here. These are the height anomalies, and here is that vigorous system here over the interior western states here. We have some troughiness right now over the southeastern part of Canada and the northeast mid-Atlantic region, and this is just kind of a reinforcing upper level low that slides to the east. We'll move forward here, and we saw that swath of precipitation from the Rockies all the way ultimately to the Mid-Atlantic region. That's associated with this system right here. Again, it sets off the development of a surface low right here, the primary low or the initial low over the Ohio Valley by the time we get to Saturday. And at that time, this system will give way to the development of another surface low near the Mid-Atlantic coastline early in the upcoming weekend. And we'll move forward here and watch that this system kind of slides to the east coast here by the latter part of the upcoming weekend, but doesn't exactly sweep out to sea. And we see it kind of hanging back on Monday and all the way into the day on Tuesday. Still vigorous upper level low. And what that tells me is Monday and Tuesday will remain mostly cloudy in the Mid-Atlantic region, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Occasional showers still on the table during the first half of next week, and likely well below normal temperatures, probably highs in many areas, only in the 50s, not only on Saturday and Sunday, but on Monday and Tuesday as well, given that upper level trough that kind of hangs around in the eastern states. At the same time, a ridge of high pressure pops up across the interior west where they're getting accumulating snow right now. By the latter part of the weekend, the early part of next week, they'll warm up. So that snow will be just a memory at this particular time, at least on a temporary basis. Well, how does that upper level 500 millibar height pattern translate to temperatures? Here we're looking at 850 millibar temperature anomalies. This is the lower part of the atmosphere, a couple thousand feet off the ground level. Kind of a mixed picture here with below normal and above normal in the eastern two-thirds of the nation, but where it is snowing right now in Idaho, Colorado, Wyoming, we have some colder than normal conditions, and we'll move forward here and watch kind of a separation here of warmer than normal conditions by the early part of the upcoming weekend with colder than normal on the western side. And again, in the Mid-Atlantic Northeast U.S., we'll have this persistent east-northeast, this onshore flow of air as low pressure forms right here. Winds flow counterclockwise around lows, and we'll see east to northeast winds, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, down to D.C., New York, up to New York City, and that'll certainly help to produce a cooler than normal weekend. Now, let's move forward here, and we go into the latter part of the upcoming weekend. A wide part of the country will be below normal. Meanwhile, Canada will be above normal throughout much of that country. But here we go into the early part of next week, and again, remembering we had that deep upper level trough at this particular time, just sitting here in this part of the U.S. with an upper level low kind of right in this position. Well, here is the associated below normal temperature pattern here. Again, we're looking at the early part of next week, and it doesn't clear out too quickly. We go all the way into Tuesday and even into the middle of next week. Here we are on Wednesday, still maintaining that trough near the eastern seaboard and that cooler than normal weather pattern throughout much of the eastern third of the nation. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from the 0Z run of the Canadian model. Look at this, a lot of soaking rainfall. There's even a centralized low pressure area right in this region as we begin the day here on Thursday, October 12th. NOAA's National Hurricane Center, as far as I know, did not name this system. Nonetheless, it is producing a soaking rainfall for this part of the nation. Again, it continues to move on an east-northeast fashion over the next day or two. It will not move up along the Atlantic seaboard. Meanwhile, out in the interior west and some of the central plains, a lot of rain and snow at those higher elevations. Let's now move forward in time here, and we'll see the progression of this system here from the middle of the country to the eastern states over the next couple of days. Again, east-northeast movement of that tropical system, and while it's out over these open waters of the still warm southwestern Atlantic, this could intensify. Maybe it will become a named tropical system at some point out over the open waters. Does not move up the east coast, but rather out to sea here. And here we go. By the time we get to Friday and into the early part of the upcoming weekend, there'll be the primary low over the Ohio Valley, with kind of a warm front extending to the east, and it turns into a wet Saturday. Certainly the afternoon and evening look wet in the I-95 corridor region. And here we go. By the time we get to the latter part of Saturday night, this initial surface low will tend to give way to the development of a surface low near the Mid-Atlantic coastline, right in this region, right here. By the time we get to late Saturday night into Sunday morning, and again, a stiff east to northeast flow of air will bring cooler than normal conditions to much of the Mid-Atlantic region throughout the weekend, really throughout the early part of next week as well. Here we go. Here's that Mid-Atlantic coastal storm just off the coast by the time we get to Sunday morning. Again, it will not clear out anytime too soon here because of that upper level low hanging back. This system, as is the case with the Gulf low, will move generally on an east-northeast fashion in this direction rather than up along the New England coastline. So New England itself will not be impacted too much in terms of rainfall by that Mid-Atlantic coastal storm here. Now, let's keep moving forward here in time. We'll take a note of that pattern. Again, it intensifies, does not move along the New England coastline, but rather out to sea, and there's enough energy in the upper part of the atmosphere with that upper level low sitting and spinning that even with this secondary surface low off the coast, it does not clear out in the eastern third of the nation. In fact, we'll see this kind of reinvigorate with that upper level low intensifying over the eastern states early next week. This is the Monday evening forecast map, still below normal temperatures and unsettled enough. Occasional showers are possible Monday and Tuesday in this part of the nation. Will go all the way out into Tuesday and into Wednesday. Maybe Wednesday will be the time where we transition to the Mid-Atlantic region to a wet and cool pattern, to a drier pattern, middle of next week. In the meantime, we saw that upper level ridge popping up over the western states. Certainly will be an influx of warmer air in much of the central and western states later this weekend into the early part of next week. So two big weather stories: a soaking rain event over the next 24 hours or so in the southeastern states, and a storm system impacting all the way from the Rockies with high altitude snow all the way to the Mid-Atlantic coastline by the upcoming weekend, and yet another cool and wet weekend coming to the Mid-Atlantic region. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.